We start with tragedy in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The White House has ordered flags to fly at half-staff across the country today to honor victims of the mass shooting. 2 young children died and 17 others were hurt after a shooter opened fire at the Annunciation Catholic Church yesterday morning. We've got team coverage on this for you this morning. Anna Schecter is here in studio working her sources linked to the investigation. Natalie Brand is following the response from the White House. But let's get you right to the scene in Minneapolis, where CBS News correspondent Nidia Cavazos has been reporting since this all began. Nidia, you were there early after this all unfolded. What can you tell us about what you saw?
Errol, when our crew first arrived at the scene, it was a very chaotic situation. There was a very heavy presence of officers, of agents on the ground. People were running, but we were also able to witness as parents were walking out with their children. Their children's arms were wrapped around their necks, and you could tell from their faces that about what they had just gone through. It was a tragic situation, and we are standing just outside of the school where it all happened yesterday. And now this is still a crime scene as investigators are working hard to try to piece this all together and try to come up with what led to this situation.
And what are you hearing from the community there now? It's fewer than 24 hours since this all happened, so I know there's still a deep sense of shock, but what comes next?
For now, we know that this is a community that is mourning. Multiple vigils were held yesterday. They're honoring those lives that were lost, and they're also asking for prayers for those that are still hospitalized and in critical condition. But as we were talking to neighbors in those homes that surround the schools, they did have one request, and they said this all has to stop, and they're asking for gun control.
It's hard to make sense of the senseless. Nidia Cavazos, thank you so much. CBS News senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety, Anna Schecter, joins us now with what we're learning. Good morning, Anna. It's hard to make sense of any of this, but what are your sources telling you about the shooter and their potential connection to the community?
Well, the shooter was actually a student at the school previously, and the shooter's mother had worked there for a period of time. So the shooter absolutely knew the church, had even drawn a sketch of the church, so really knew the exact makeup of the building that the shooter was attacking. So what prosecutors are going to be looking at is, was this a targeted attack at the church, an anti-Catholic hate crime, Errol?
Now, helping the investigation, we're seeing some images there. The shooter had I guess you could call it a manifesto, writings, videos. What did that suggest?
Very disturbing videos and writings, and our team has been reviewing it since they came to light yesterday. In fact, the shooter had timed the videos to post to YouTube, timed to the attack. Those videos show ammunition, weapons with hateful writing, almost like kind of a catalog of different demographics to target. So it's actually been difficult for investigators to pin down the exact motive, because this was a very disturbed person who glorified past mass shooters in those writings, as well as glorified acts of violence against children.
Yeah. All right, Anna, thank you for the latest on all of that. For more on how lawmakers are reacting, let's bring in CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand. Natalie, this is such a horrific incident that's happened to so many young people. What is the White House response to this?
Well, in a social media post following the incident, President Trump said that he was being briefed. The White House was monitoring the situation. Shortly after that, he issued a proclamation calling for all federal flags to be flown at half-staff as a mark of respect for the victims. That's happened here at the White House and across the district and across the country. As you and Anna were talking about earlier, the FBI is involved in this investigation, saying that they are investigating it as an act of domestic terrorism, and that they will provide more updates when possible. But we will have to wait for additional statements by the president and vice president, who's Catholic himself, about questions that are being raised by the community members and lawmakers over on Capitol Hill, particularly Democrats, about gun legislation, school safety, and what happens next in light of this.
And we're going to have much more on all of this in about 18 minutes from now. But I want to ask you about some other big headlines out of the White House, because the CDC, as far as the White House says, the White House has fired its director. Her lawyers say, the leader of the CDC, that she's not resigned or been legally fired. So what's happening there?
Yeah, and this is just weeks after she was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. As you alluded to, this firing is now contested. There's a dispute between the administration and attorneys for CDC Director Susan Montaraz about the firing. Her attorney saying that she wasn't legally fired. But what happened is we got this social media post from Health and Human Services announcing that she was no longer director of the CDC. Well, her attorney says that she's not going to resign, accused Secretary Kennedy of, quote, weaponizing public health, and in a statement said when Director Montaraz refused to rubber stamp, quote, unscientific, reckless directives and fire dedicated health experts, she chose protecting the public over serving a political agenda, and saying that for that she's been targeted. Now, her attorney's also saying on a technicality, because she was notified by a White House staffer and not the president himself, that this firing is not valid, since she is a presidential appointee, Senate confirmed position. The White House, meanwhile, saying that, you know, she did not support the president's agenda of making America healthy again, and that they are standing by this termination. Well, the Senate Health Committee over in Capitol Hill is going to get involved. The chair, Bill Cassidy, Republican, a doctor himself, says that oversight is needed here. Ranking member Bernie Sanders calling for hearings in light of this. And also important to note, Errol, that at least three other top CDC officials resign following this news. One citing deep concern with changes to vaccine policy and impacts to public health. All of this coming on the same day that HHS, announced steps to try to limit who's eligible for the COVID vaccine, Errol.
Wow, important news for all Americans to hear. Natalie, thank you so much.